Hello and welcome back to the She Lives Purposefully podcast. I am so thankful that you're here. My name is Megan, and today I brought back my sweet friend Julia. She was on our series, the maternity leave series, What God is Speaking to You About series, and she was so loved, and we just were vibing so good. So I was like, oh, I have to have her back on the podcast. Julia, how are you doing?
Hi, thanks for having me back. I had so much fun last time.
Oh my gosh.
I was so nervous before, but then afterwards I was like, wow, that was so much fun.
I love it. I'm so glad. I had so much fun too. It's so funny because I feel like I record these all the time and I feel so nervous
Do
right
you?
now.
I was wondering how you feel beforehand.
So weird. I feel like I don't typically feel too nervous, but I don't know why. Like we said record or whatever.
Yeah.
Not said record. I'm so nervous. I don't know why. This is so weird. Yeah, I feel like I don't get too nervous anymore, but I feel particularly nervous right now. It's not even like we're having a spicy combo.
No.
It's like going to be,
Yeah, I don't know. I was so
Controversial.
nervous all day.
Oh, I'm glad we're recording and, getting through it. I love it. How was your Halloween? You're not a Halloween.
No, I am not a fan of Halloween.
Yeah.
And honestly, it really doesn't even have to do a ton with like the demonic aspect of it. I mean, I don't like that, but that's really not why I hate Halloween.
Yeah.
I just have never liked it. I never liked dressing up.
Oh.
Going out and trick-or-treating was like, okay, but it was never really my thing.
Yeah. I feel like as a shy kid, I can resonate with like just not wanting to go up to people's doors. Like, I don't want to.
Yeah. I always would. I mean, I never stayed back to hand out candy, but I always wanted to.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's so like.
I just think it was the dress up thing. I'm not really a dress up person.
Yeah. No, I get that. I totally get that.
Yeah. But how was your first Halloween in your own home?
It was so fun. I love that we're having this conversation because you're like, Halloween is demonic. And I'm like, well, we celebrated that. No, but I think it's so good because I feel like I have been just like on the fence about how I feel about Halloween. I talked about it in the last episode too. Just like, I feel like conflicted internally and was kind of thinking like, all right, we're not celebrating the darkness of Halloween because I think we can get into really tricky territory when it comes to that. Like it is just like there is so much darkness around it. But we did pass out candy. We had worship music playing. We set up a little like table and chairs outside. Had what's his name? Forrest Frank playing.
Oh, I love it.
And then we forgot to I said we were going to get Baby Donnie a costume.
Yes.
A little pumpkin. We did not. I just did not do it in time. So he had from Old Navy, it's like this pants and onesie set. And it's got like bears, something else. And it comes with a bear hoodie, like with little ears and
That's
like a
so
bear face
cute.
on the sweatshirt. So we put that on him and he was just a teddy bear for
His
Halloween.
first Halloween costume.
Yeah. It was so precious though. Like I was obsessed. Like just these little kids and their little like cute costumes coming up, like wanting candy and stuff. But I will say, like once I think it was like 7:30 rolled around and the little kids were done and the bigger kids came out. Bigger kids meaning like
Scary teenagers.
like teenagers, yeah, came out. I was like, I'm going inside. We were basically out of candy anyway. And I was so glad I went inside because like I went in, Baby Donnie is sleeping. And I hear from the inside some kids screaming, like just like a loud, just like obnoxious, not like a scary scream. And then I hear some girl curse outside and I was like, oh, I wonder what that's about.
At your house?
And so Donnie came in and I was like, oh, I heard somebody like cursing. And he was like, yeah, somebody was like mad that we ran out of candy. She was like,
what?
Are you curse like word like
Was her mother around?
I know. I'm like, I think it's just
my
these teens hanging out together. You don't have candy anymore. Like you're out of candy.
Jeez.
And he was like, you should have come earlier. Like, it was not my fault.
Wow.
But I'm not about that. Like,
oh my goodness.
I don't like that
No.
one bit. No.
Yeah.
So I'm here for the little kids and their cute little costumes.
Yeah.
The scary costumes I was not really there for. I also talked about that last episode. Like, I'm just not here for the fear aspect of it.
Right.
But I like let's give candy to these kids in costumes. Like, it's just cute.
Yeah, there's definitely two different types of Halloween. There's
Yeah.
like the scary, go to a scary maze sort of Halloween. And then there's the cute little kids dressing up in their little princess
Yes.
costumes.
Yeah.
Which is sweet.
No, I agree. I thought it was cute. I also definitely ate. Like the reason maybe we ran out of candy was because I ate some from the bowl. Like wait,
You were snacking as you were
yes,
passing.
on those M&Ms. They get me so good. And I feel like they're like everything that, like, I'm trying to avoid dairy. Like, it's got the red 40, like all the stuff. Yeah. And I was like munching hard.
No, as you're sitting there in front of the bowl, how can you not?
How can you not? How can you avoid this?
It's staring you in the face.
No, literally. I also went to address that I know that I'm in the exact same color coordinated look as last week. If you're watching on YouTube, black top. It's a different black top, but a black top, belt, and probably the same jeans as last time. So just throwing that out there.
It's okay. We don't have any outfit remembers watching.
Yeah. So thank you. I appreciate no judgment zone. But today we're talking about social media comparison and how that can really like prevent you from moving forward into what God wants to do in your life. And it just kind of hit me a couple months ago, especially, I think, where I just was like, oh my gosh, like realizing how much we just look around, especially on social media. And I can find that I'm like, oh, this person's doing this person's doing this. And so many different ways to compare. But specifically, I'm like, oh, like I want to do what they're doing or whatever. And you kind of forget to like seek the Lord or just like step into like really listen to the Lord and be like, okay, what is he doing in my own life? And am I wasting time looking at other people instead of like moving forward? So we're talking about that today, and I'm excited to like chat about that conversation.
Do you feel like since motherhood it's been something that has heightened, or do you feel like it's subsided now that you're a mom?
Such a good question. I feel like I have felt a pull in both directions. I think in one aspect it's been kind of difficult to see on social media, like especially other moms like doing really cool things, like moms who, you know, they're not in the newborn stage, even though I'm out of the newborn stage now. Like he's 3 months old. So I think that's like officially end of the 4th trimester or whatever. Yeah. Right. Like postpartum. But they've like got, you know, they seem like they've got everything together and they're doing really cool things with their businesses or whatever it is. And I feel like that's been hard for me comparison wise. And I'm like, why can't I be doing that too? Like, why can't I figure this out? You know? But I think on the other side of it too, I have recognized what my primary calling and purpose is right now, to be like a wife and a mom. And my primary role right now is really to be like taking care of this baby boy. And so everything else comes secondary. And so if all those other things aren't really getting done necessarily, then like I'm still fulfilling what the Lord's calling me to kind of, you know? So I feel like it's been a pull in both directions of those two different thoughts. One where I'm like, I am comparing myself to other people who are in similar niches, doing similar things and really crushing it. Yeah. And then in another sense, I'm like, you know what? Like I have never felt more so like I am doing what God is calling me to do right now. Like I've never felt so firmly that that's what I'm walking in.
Yeah.
Maybe I wouldn't say never felt so firmly, but I haven't felt so firmly in a long time, if that makes sense.
Right.
I don't know if that all makes sense.
No, that totally makes sense. And do you think that social media do you think you compare yourself more to people on social media because you're seeing the good parts of their life? Or is it something that even with people that you know in your daily life, do you find yourself comparing to them more or social media more?
I think both. I would say more social media. But there are definitely moms that I know firsthand that I am comparing myself to, that I just feel like are having it more together also, or at least I imagine that they do.
Right.
From little glimpses that I see that are probably actually from social media. Like,
yeah, that's interesting. Even people that we know in person, what we see of their life on social media, making it seem like they have it all together.
100%. Yes. Maybe it's a social media thing. Like, I think it's way more, I think it more comes from there, even if I know the person in real life.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause what you are seeing from them when they're posting their cute pictures and everything, even if they tell you that they don't have it all together, it's sometimes when you see that on social media, you forget what they tell you in person, and it's just like, oh man, they're so cute. Everything's going well for them.
I know. Like even if they say they don't have it all together, they have it more together than I do. Right. Kind of idea. Yeah. Do you feel like social media comparison is a struggle for you? I feel like you seem as though you have, like, I feel like I'm addicted to social media hardcore. I feel like you have like a healthier relationship with social media than I do.
I definitely have a social media addiction without a doubt, for sure. But I think that for myself, when it comes to struggling with comparison, it's less about comparing myself with people on social media, more so people that I know in my life.
So interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm like, who? No.
Well, let me tell you. No, when it comes to social media, I mean, I definitely do compare myself when I see people posting things on social media, but I think more so of what I follow on social media, I guess it's more of celebrities and people that I don't know personally.
Yeah, okay.
People that I know don't even have the same type of life that I have.
Yeah.
So it's like I can't really compare myself to them because we're like worlds apart almost.
Right.
Whereas people in my daily life that I know, people that I work with, friends or whatever, it's easier to compare myself to them because they almost seem more like their life is more reality to me because they're not worlds away, sort of, if that makes sense.
100%. No, that totally makes sense. That is so interesting. I feel like it makes perfect sense, but it's so fascinating that I feel like for me, it's like social media is the biggest thing. I also feel like maybe lately I have been like at home so much that like social media has become a huge
part of your day.
Yeah. Right. Like just at home, like with baby Donnie. Like, yeah. Well, that's so interesting. What do you feel like are things, if you don't mind me asking, like that have been big comparison points? Maybe that's a personal question. Like, I guess, what is the question I'm trying to ask? Like, I guess this is something that I'm wondering. Is it things that just like come across, like you see this person, you're like, oh, automatically comparing because you know the things going on in their lives? Or is it the way that they like present themselves in that moment? Like they come in like seeming like they have it all kind of vibe. And not throwing it in your face necessarily, but that maybe is how it feels. Or is it just like them existing like and being around is like, oh.
I think more of them existing, seeing what stage of life they're in, that sort of thing. Not necessarily what they're presenting on social media, but just knowing where they're at in life, I guess.
Yeah.
And comparing my life. Am I at that point? Do I have that thing?
Oh, yeah. That's so good.
Not necessarily, because I think I don't do a good job of it, but I guess I do a better job in my mind of seeing things on social media and knowing like, okay, they're only posting that because that's like a good thing out of maybe like one good thing out of a hard day, or like, that it's just a shiny part of somebody's life and they're not posting all the hard things.
Right. That's so good of you. Literally, like not even an hour ago, I saw another mom post on social media and I'm like, we have had a conversation and I know like that there have been, just like mom struggles. And I'm still looking at that and I'm like, oh, she's got it all together. Like she's conquered everything. Like, everything we talked about is relevant. Like, like I feel like I struggle so much with that. Like even knowing like you only post the highlights. I'm like, maybe there's not really any lowlights.
Right. No, it is. Yeah. When you're seeing it visually, it is hard to forget. Yeah. But when you have those moments, what are some things that help you?
That's so good.
To bring yourself back to reality?
Yeah. I think, honestly, it has to come back to, for me, is like not even necessarily anything about them or like knowing that it's just a highlight, none of that. But it's like, okay, like it has to just be between me and the Lord. Like, what does God have for me right now? And like, where has he placed me right now? And like, it really can't be anything related to like, okay, well, maybe they don't have it that good, or maybe it's just this, or maybe it's just that. It's like, no, like what if they did have the absolute best and like everything that they were posting was like, not just the highlight, but the low light. Like they're just thriving right now, like still me comparing myself to them, like, is not okay. So I think for me, it really is like, okay, recognizing the stage of life that I am in and like where the Lord has me and saying like, okay, like this is where the Lord has me is a gift, like the struggles of it, all of it. And, like this is aside from even like motherhood being a gift and all of that. But just, I remember one time years ago seeing a post on social media of somebody that I knew personally, and they had gotten something that I wanted so bad.
Ooh.
And I remember sobbing. It just was like, I just was like sobbing. And I remember feeling so bitter, like just so upset. And it's like, I deserve this more. Like it just took a nasty turn in my heart. Like,
Yeah.
and you just like, it's so easy to compare. And I remember, I think I was like talking with my mom or dad. We were all in the kitchen and it just had to be like this heart check for me. And it's like, okay, well, if that's not what the Lord has for you right now, like, why do you think you deserve this more than this person? You know, it's just like, whoa, like what's happening in my own heart versus like, oh, like maybe it's not that good for them. Like, no, it's great for them. Like, but it's more so what's going on and what the Lord is doing in my own life in that moment. Even if I don't have everything that I want or somebody else has something that I want, it's like, okay, well, where the Lord has me is the best place that I can be right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like that kind of mindset is something I have to go back to. Have it for you, like when it comes to like in person. I love that we're talking about this too, because this applies then, like comparison is just a thing no matter where you like find it. You know?
Yeah, social media and in real life.
Yeah.
I feel like something that I've been trying to implement lately in my life, I've been trying to make a conscious effort of it because it doesn't come naturally to me, but taking every thought captive to be in obedience to Christ. That was something that I used to always hear people say that phrase and I never understood what it meant.
Powerful.
Yeah. It never made sense to me until like semi recently.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe if anybody doesn't understand what that means.
Yeah. What does that look like practically?
So basically I wrote down the verse where it talks about it, but taking every thought captive to obey Christ essentially means when you have thoughts that come into your mind that aren't of God, stopping those thoughts in the moment and replacing them with the truth of God's word. So where is it? Let's see. In 2 Corinthians chapter 10, it talks about, for the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but have divine power to destroy strongholds. So we destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God and take every thought captive to obey Christ. So essentially, that's something that I've been trying and not doing super well with, but trying to implement in my life lately is taking my thoughts captive. And when I have those times of jealousy or anxiousness, scrolling on social media or hearing a story of someone in person, something that they have that I want, just trying to recognize that it's not from God and then trying to replace it with the truth of God's word. Because like it talks about in that verse, like the Lord has given us weapons that are not of the flesh, but are spiritual things to defeat those jealous and anxious thoughts that we have. Yeah. And we can do that by replacing it with the truth of his word.
I love that. It reminds me of the Philippians 4 passage where it's talking about like be anxious for nothing. And then a couple verses later, it says like, think on things that are like true and lovely. And it's this whole list. And I feel like it is such a remedy for anxiety. So it's the same thing here, like a remedy for like comparison or just like thoughts that aren't of God, to be like, okay, pause. And I love that you said that, like recognizing that I'm thinking these things and feeling these things, and then not just like recognizing it, but replacing it with something else. I feel like that's just so powerful. And I think too, it's so important then to like recognize that comparison is not of God. Like, because I think sometimes maybe we can trip ourselves up to think like, okay, it's a motivator or like, something like that. It's like, no, pause. Like me coveting something else, which is really what it is, or envying somebody else, which is really what it is. Those things are not of the Lord. Contentment is of the Lord. Like discontentment is not. And I do feel like maybe in society, like we can think that like being discontent can have its positives. But when it comes to coveting and like envying it, that's not something that the Lord has. So it is good to be like, okay, I'm taking this, recognizing this, stopping it, like praying over it and replacing it with something else.
Yeah. And also because it's like the things that what we think leads to how we act and where we go in life. So if we're thinking,
I'm so convicted just as you said that, like there's areas I'm like, oh my gosh. Like,
no, seriously. I like find that for myself, like, the thoughts that I'm thinking drive my actions, and that drives where I'm going in my life, the decisions that I make. So if it's thoughts of comparison and, this person has this and that's something that I want, so I'm going to try and get that, then that leads you away from what the Lord has for you.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think, because then I remember, I think Sadie Robertson said this once, and she was talking about how like, basically if you were looking at everybody else's races and how they're running their race, like you are not going to be able to run the race set before you. And it's so important because you can look around and say like, oh, this person has this. This is exactly what I've been wanting. But number one, just because the Lord gave it to somebody else doesn't mean that it's taken from you.
Right. It takes nothing away from you.
It takes nothing away. This is just something that the Lord has given to them. But also, like, if that is not what God has for you right now, like, again, wherever the Lord has placed you is the best place that you can be. It is going to be the most fruitful place. I really believe that. And also, like give you the best opportunity to make an impact for him. Like it's going to have eternal impact. It is going to like draw you closer to him. Like if you allow it to, and if you like step into that.
Yes.
But if you are sitting in that place and saying like, oh, like I'm just going to sit here until the Lord gives me that, then like that is a wasted season and a wasted place. And I think that can apply to so many different like seasons of life. But yeah, and it just, I think it's hard because it's so contradictory to like living with purpose and living purposefully. I remember like being in college at Drexel and like, you know, you just want to be in a different place. Maybe you want to be working or like, just like single at the time and you want to be in this relationship and just like all these different things. But I remember like there was this season, and it was actually around the time that I started She Lives Purposely. So maybe it was just rubbing off on me, like putting out this work and like receiving it. You know what I mean? Like, but I was so content with where I was. And I was like really just like pouring out, living for the Lord and wanting to like share the gospel with people and encourage people and like looking for every opportunity where God had me in that moment. Yeah. And I didn't have the things that I wanted, but I was like so happy to just be like, okay, God, show me what you have for me today.
Yeah.
Open my eyes to anything that I can do right where I am. And like, if I am busy instead, just looking around, seeing other people, then I'm not praying those things and I'm not stepping out into what God has for me right there, you know?
Yeah. The best place that we can be is smack dab in the middle of his will for us. So if we are distracted with comparison or with wanting to chase after these things that the desires of our heart, then even if we get those things that we want, it's not going to be a peaceful place because it's not the Lord's will for us.
So good.
Like where we're going to find the most peace, where we're going to find the most contentment and the most joy, like you said, if we allow it, is in the will of the Lord for our lives.
Yeah. It makes me think too of, I feel like just my brain is not, I hope I'm getting this person correctly. I am. Okay. I'm just confirming it in my brain. Joseph in the Bible. And thinking about how like, you know, he was sold into slavery by his brothers and then he's working for this guy. This guy's wife basically says that like he attacked her and so he's put in prison and he didn't do it, but he's put in prison. And then he's in prison forever. Everybody forgets about him. I'm talking about the right person, right?
Oh.
Okay. Just such a mom brain moment. Here I am going on and on. Everybody forgets about him. And then there is a specific moment when he is raised up, finally. Like Pharaoh remembers, and then, or, you know, the guy who talks to Pharaoh, remember, I forget if it was the guy, it was the wine tester, the drink tester, remembers Joseph. And then Joseph is raised up and all these different things. So incredible. And the Lord had, you know, this whole journey for him. Now thinking through, like, let's say that he's thrown in prison and then he like interprets the dream of this drink tester. And the drink tester says, I'm going to remember you. And he doesn't for a long time. Let's say that he did remember him. And all of a sudden Joseph's set free and he goes home and he lives this life, you know, and I think, oh, I don't know if you can hear a baby boy crying.
Little Donnie.
My husband's out there and so are my parents, so he's okay, but oh my goodness.
Poor guy. Oh.
Okay, sorry. Maybe I'll edit that out. We'll see. We'll see what happens. But all that to say is, so like imagine if he had been remembered earlier. And you know, theoretically that would have been the Lord's will for his life. But like if he had been set free from prison too soon, quote unquote, and then was able to step into all these different things, he would not have stepped into being second in command in all of Egypt. Yeah. Like, and right with Pharaoh, you know, raised up into this position. It would have been a completely different trajectory for his life. And so it just really makes me like, remember, okay, the Lord has like his timing, everything is so perfect. And so him being where he was that whole time was right where the Lord had him for a reason. Like, it wasn't too long, too short. It all lined up with what God was doing. And so, yeah, all that to say is, like, if it was a different, like, if anything had moved differently in his life, his whole life would have changed and been a different story. But him being where he was in prison for that long, like, led to him being second in command of all of Egypt.
Yeah.
So, yeah, all that to say is, like, yeah, the Lord has you where he has you, and, like, where he has you is the best place that you can be. And you don't know what that's going to lead to, you know? But also, and even maybe more importantly, like, you don't know what it's leading to right now because you don't know what the future is going to hold. But, like, God is doing things and wants to do things where you're at in this moment of time. And with the people that he has placed you around in the setting that you're in, like, he wants to use you. And sometimes we just don't open ourselves up to that because we're, like, looking around at other people.
Yeah, we don't let ourselves be used by the Lord because we want to chase after this or we want to chase after that.
Or he's not using me like he's using that person.
Yeah.
Or how can I be used like that person? So you're, like, literally putting blinders on to the things around you.
Yeah, you're putting yourself, or you're almost putting the Lord in a box. Yeah. In a sort of sense where, so yeah, I don't even know where I was going with that thought. But
no, I feel like it is like putting him in a box and saying, like, okay, if you're not going to use me like this, then, like, I'm not really being used. Yeah. Period. You know, like, in this place that I'm in. But, like, who is to say, like, what God is and is not doing? It's just, it's so crazy. I remember, too, another story. I think I've told the story and I butcher it every single time because I don't know who it's about. I just know it's about a, like, famous Christian speaker. But there was this pastor who went and he led, like, a prayer service at this college. And he was, like, so prayerful about, like, it was coming up and, you know, prayerful about it and, like, promoting it, all these things. And literally one guy came to this service.
Oh, I feel like
or maybe it's like one guy got saved, like, one thing. And so he felt like, what a waste. Like, not a waste, but, like, oh, this just was way less fruitful than I thought it was going to be. But then that one person was, like, Charles Spurgeon or, like, Billy Graham. It was somebody crazy that, like,
somebody very impactful.
The world. Yeah. And so this guy basically impacted the world from, like, where God had him in that moment. Even if he felt like it was less significant than what, you know, other people were doing, he had such a huge impact and he didn't even know it.
Yeah.
And so it really, it speaks to, like, okay, the Lord has different plans for different people, but, like, the Lord has a life of impact for you. And that might look different than the life of impact he has for somebody else, but, like, he has plans for you that are just so eternally impactful, and that's huge.
Yeah, and even when it comes to things that we desire as Christians, we can think, like, well, Lord, that's a good thing that I want. Like, marriage, that's a good thing. Serving in this ministry, that's a good thing. These aren't sinful things. Yeah. But if it's not what the Lord has for you, then it's not a place that you want to be in.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's so good. Like, it doesn't have to be a bad thing that you're coveting. It can be a good thing. But that doesn't mean, like you said, like, if it's not what God has for you, then that's just not where you want to be, because it's going to be less fruitful than where you're at right now, you know.
Yeah I heard David Jeremiah say that the Lord doesn't have to demolish you, or sorry, not the Lord, Satan doesn't have to demolish you. He's fine with distracting you because that accomplishes the same purpose of you not living fully in God's plan.
That's so good.
Which is, like, so I never think of it in those terms, you know, because distraction, it seems little, but it still pulls you away from living fully in what the Lord wants to do in your life.
That's so good and so convicting. That's so convicting. I feel like I'm just thinking about that in my own life, like being so easily distracted, and maybe it's by other people. Maybe it's just social media, like endless scrolling of, like, unimportant stuff, or, like, information overload, things that I can't control, can't do anything about anyway. And just being so distracted.
Or just a waste of time.
Yes. I think that's a big thing too when it comes to social media. For me, is it's like I can be missing out on what God wants to do in me because I have spent X amount of time scrolling on Instagram Reels or I don't have TikTok, but, like, TikTok I feel like is a really big time suck too.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that's a huge thing too. I love that quote from him. Can you read that again?
Yeah, well, the full thing, that was just a little part of the end. But he says, this is the subtle danger of distraction. It can steal your attention without you even realizing it. It can pull you away from God's presence, not because you've chosen sin, but because you have chosen not to seek guidance or to ignore guidance from the Lord. And the enemy is perfectly fine with that. Distraction accomplishes the same thing. It keeps you from living fully in God's plan.
Wow. Wow. That's so good. I love that, like, because you're just not seeking guidance from the Lord. Like, it's not that you're necessarily in an act of sin, but like even just not seeking guidance from him. It reminds me too of like in Proverbs, like talking about slothfulness and idleness and just like not, like moving forward or like seeking the Lord, but just kind of
staying
like,
in a comfortable place.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not seeking...
And I love a comfy place. Like,
yep.
It's so easy.
It's so easy. Yeah. And it's so easy to get stuck there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's so good. What a convicting thought. Yeah. And I feel like it just makes me think like, okay, then what can we do practically to combat being distracted from what God has and combat comparison? I feel like what you were saying was really helpful of taking your thoughts captive. Yeah. Can you go through again? Like, what are things? Okay. So you take the thought captive and then you're replacing it, but like what practically are you replacing that with?
Practically replacing it with scripture or the promises of God that you know to be true. And honestly, a big one that just a general one, not in any type of situation, comparing the trials that you're going through now to the glory that is to come. Like thinking of, okay, yes, this thing is frustrating me. Now there's this desire that I want that I don't feel like I'm getting. But one day we'll be standing in the glory of the Lord, and all of those things, all of those desires of our hearts that we didn't have, they won't even be a comparison to what we're standing face to face to in heaven.
So good.
Like that's something that reshapes or gives me a good perspective 100%. When I feel like I'm struggling with comparison.
Yeah, that's a big perspective shift. And I feel like that's exactly what we need when we're struggling with comparison is like we were talking about earlier, it's not necessarily saying like, okay, what this person has can't be that good. Like maybe it is, but like I need a perspective shift of what
something that's solid truth.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's so powerful. I remember in counseling one time, my counselor just literally reminded me, like, we do have power over our minds. Like, scripturally, like, we really do. Like, my heart.
Donnie.
I know, a little cry. Yeah, we do have power over our hearts and minds. And it is with scripture. It's with truth. And I love it, too, like, with the actual promises of God. That's so powerful.
Yeah, I was reading David Guzik, and he was saying, we are not helpless victims or recipients of our thoughts. We can choose to stop our thoughts and bring every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ.
That's so good. And I feel like it feels very, anti-victimhood, which is so hard because I think, especially with comparison, like you are essentially becoming a victim. I'm lesser, they have more, like all of that. And it's so easy, I think, just in our society or culture to feel like a victim for whatever reason. And so to be able to say like, no, I actually like can control, like I can stop that, and I can, not be a victim to my thoughts, I think is so huge. And like in our pause too, but we were talking about how I think that even applies to like anxiety. Like I could say like, no, I'm not gonna have this thought.
You do have the power to control your mind.
So crazy, so wild. But I think it's so important when it comes to coveting, envy, comparison. I thought that quote was so good.
Yeah, because in that verse in 2 Corinthians, where Paul's talking about taking our thoughts captive, he talks about the enemy setting up strongholds in our mind, which comparison is a stronghold that the enemy sets up in our mind. But he talks about how the Lord does give us the weapons that we need in order to fight against those strongholds. And the word of the Lord and prayer are some of those weapons that he gives us to demolish those strongholds. Yeah,
and I think too, just like how important, especially if your comparison comes from social media, like to be able to be like, okay, I'm going to spend less time on social media and I'm going to spend more time in prayer and I'm going to spend more time reading my Bible. And if you're not doing those things, like then I'm going to actually do those things, instead of waking up and scrolling, like I'm going to wake up and pray, or like wake up. And even if it's like, you know, you're too tired to like pull out your Bible in that moment, like wake up and go to the Bible app and then in a couple minutes read my Bible. Like,
right.
you know, and using those things to combat our minds. And I love that you brought that up too, where it's like he wants to set up strongholds in our brains.
Yeah,
and like,
the enemy.
We are actively, like, it's such a reminder, like we are actively fighting. Like this life is a fight. It is warfare. It's
and Jesus reminds us to stay alert about those things.
Yeah. And so remembering, like, even something as what can feel silly and light as comparison, like it's a battle and it's something that we are fighting against. It's not something we can walk through passively, because it will win if we're passive with it. Just like so many other things in life.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
So good.
And where was I going with that thought that I just had? Oh my gosh, I totally just lost my train of thought.
That happens to me all the time. No, literally all the time.
Oh, what I was going to say was, I know you've taken breaks from social media before. Like you've gone, like a month or so without being on Instagram?
Yeah.
Do you feel like when you did that, was that something helpful for you in diminishing thoughts of comparison in your life, in your mind?
That's such a good question. It's been a while since I've done it, honestly. So I should do it again. I loved it. I remember being so, like, it really felt transformative, and it really helped me recognize how addicted I was to social media, I think, as well. I think actually I do remember feeling like less comparison with other people, and to feeling like it actually like bettered my relationships with people that I would have been comparing myself to.
Interesting.
Because like I remember, for example, a friend of ours went on a trip during that time. And it was a trip, like, you know, like you can just easily be like, oh, like she gets to go on this trip and that's so fun and I'm so jealous and like this, yada, this, you know, this and that. But I didn't see the trip. And so I had to like ask her about it. And it felt like, not that you still obviously can't be like, oh, I really want to go on this trip that she's talking about. But it was so much better to actually like talk to her about the trip,
right? Versus
like just seeing these things and allowing myself to get jealous like over photos and things like that, versus having a conversation with my friend who I love and care about and like, talk about the trip in that way. So I feel like it was really helpful to actually take the break from social media. It's powerful stuff.
Yeah, because that's another thing. I mean, it would be something very hard for me, but maybe if you are having a real issue with social media, with comparison, you know, you're seeing things on there that are making you feel anxious about your own life and the stage of life that you're in.
Yeah.
Maybe pray about cutting yourself off from social media altogether. Like maybe that's something the Lord's calling you to do.
100%. And I think you can take it in steps too. Like say like, all right, I'm going to take a week off. And then like, you know, maybe for Lent this year, like that's when I have done mine.
That's right. Yeah.
And I think it's like 40 days. So like maybe that's the next step is like you do that. And then it's like, okay, I'm going to bite the bullet and I'm going to like completely go off social media. My sister just went off social media like permanently. I'm pretty sure it's permanent. It's
indefinite.
Yeah. She's gone, which is so hard because I'm like sending reels to her and then I'm like, oh wait, you're not going to see these. Like I have to like screen record and send it to you. Or like when she comes over, but the amount of like, it's so embarrassing. Like the amount of, which is telling of how much I am on reels. But she's fully off, which I thought was such a great and big and powerful move. And two, it's like, you know, we can think, oh, it's such a big deal. And it is such a big deal. But struggling with comparison and anxiety is a bigger deal.
Right.
You know, fighting that fight like is a bigger deal. And
and it has like real impacts on your life.
Real impacts. And so if I'm laying this down to win this battle, like that's worth it.
Yep. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the verse where the Lord talks about like if your eye is causing you to sin, pluck it out.
Yeah. Yep. And it's like losing the battle is the greater loss than like losing your eye or your hand, you know, or social media. Yeah. So that's really good too. Okay, so we have like taking our thoughts captive, filling our minds with truths, prayer, God's word, God's promises, maybe like actually getting rid of social media. I feel like those are really good practical ways to like combat comparison. I think too, just like we were talking about, having that perspective shift of eternal things and also like, okay, where God has me now, and having that as a constant reminder, like, the Lord has a purpose for me right where I am at today. Like actually in this day, the people that I'm going to interact with, like, can have eternal value and impact if I'm asking the Lord to open my eyes to it. And I think that really helps negate me wanting to do something else, because it's like, whoa, the Lord has things for me in the path that I'm about to walk on.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Uh-huh.
That's huge.
Yeah, and even just letting yourself be open to that and seeing how the Lord is using you in those areas that you never expected him to use you.
Yeah.
And then having those things sort of as like stones of remembrance as you continue to walk with the Lord, like remembering how he used me in those situations that I never thought he could. So how can he use me in this season of my life where I don't feel like I have the things that I want, or, you know, I think that the Lord could be using me in this, but I don't have that. So how can he use me right where I am right now?
Yeah, that's such a good like question to ask ourselves in that moment. I love that. I think that's so good. Are there any other thoughts that you have, like, in relation to all things comparison, social media, or, you know, in-person comparison?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. One of the things with like social media that I just always think about is, especially when it comes to famous people or like, you know, people that we don't know, but we see and we compare our lives to them. Like a lot of the times you hear about, you see all these things on social media. They're traveling the world. They have this relationship, the beauty, the money. And then you hear about their actual lives and how miserable they are and how much they struggle. And, you know, it's like, oh, I was coveting these things. I was jealous of these things. I wanted to have this life that they have. And then you hear about actually what it's like behind closed doors. So when it comes to social media, you just never really know.
Yeah.
Like you see the shiny part of someone's life, but you never really know in their heart what's going on, or behind closed doors in their life what's going on. So you're kind of comparing yourself to a figment of the imagination that they are creating.
That's
almost
so good. And I think even in person too, like that could be applicable, where it's like, okay, yes, like I can see that this person got this thing, and you can even know this person and know maybe even so much about their lives. Like you could be close to somebody, you know, but you are not always going to know like every detail about what they're going through, or things that they would trade for what like you would have, or like that they would give up to not be struggling with a certain thing, you know. And so I think that's always true too, where like, yeah, maybe sometimes like everything they have, they're thriving, but maybe like sometimes they're really not. And it is like, what is that expression? Like all that glitters isn't gold, like kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. I think that's such a good reminder and a good check. I personally have been, never mind. I was going to say something, but I feel like it's not. I don't know. It makes sense right now anyway.
Too deep.
Yeah. No, too shallow. But I feel like I have been convicted already, like through our conversation, when it comes to comparison, and even otherwise, like just whether it's from comparison or not, just distraction from what God is doing, and just allowing myself to be distracted and not focused when really the time is short, you know? And so it's important to not be distracted, not be comparing. Yeah. So thank you so much for all of your wisdom.
Thanks
Jules.
for having me.
Oh my goodness. You're such a treat to talk to. You guys, thank you for listening and joining us in this conversation. We love you so much. And I hope that this was an encouragement to you friends. Live purposefully and live for Jesus. See ya.